скинули ядерные бомбы. А сегодня нынешние правители в Японии обвиняют в некой ядерной безответственности нашу страну, не указывая, кто стал причиной гибели и страданий тысяч, десятков, сотен тысяч подданных Японии. Вот здесь то же самое. Разоряли, убивали граждан Молдавии тогда, в 1946-1947 году, уничтожали какую там экономику, землю сжигали, в прямом смысле этого слова, нацисты. А теперь режим Санду все это переворачивает, обвиняя в этом Советский Союз. Обеспечение сбора урожая и его изъятие у крестьян для нужд Бухареста было главной задачей румынской администрации тогда. Десятки миллионов пудов хлеба, других сельхозпродуктов, сотни тысяч голов скота были вывезены из Молдавии. Шерсть, кожа, табак полностью подлежали сдаче оккупационным властям. Это не знает Майя Санду? Если не знает, это чудовищно. А если знает, это вообще бесчеловечно. В результате разрушения системы медицинской помощи резко возросла заболеваемость туберкулезом, тифом. Распространились малярия, сыпной и брюшной тиф, скарлатин и другие заболевания. Из-за голода, массовых эпидемий, жестокого обращения с момента оккупации до мая 1900...
and typhoid fever, scarlet fever, and around 200,000 inhabitants of Moldova died. It was 7% of its population back then. The Soviet authorities took the most active measures in order to restore the economy of Moldova. 448 million rubles were allocated from the Soviet Union budget, 20,000 tons of ferrous metals, 226,000 tons of coal, 51 tons of oil products, more than 17 tons of seeds, and about 17,000 cattle. It was handed to Moldova in the time of Nazi Germany, fighting against Nazi Germany and its satellites. The Moldovan citizens do remember it and do remember the heroic feats of their great-grandfathers who fought for the independence of Moldova and protected it, who restored their homeland from ruins. Unfortunately, the current Moldovan leadership identifies itself with Romania, has Romanian passports, and expresses its allegiance to Romanian authorities. It's just a destruction of historic memory. Another issue connected with the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War, how it is now rewritten, how Nazism is glorified. It's about yet another visit by the Japanese politicians to the Shintoist Yasukuni Shrine. It's another symbol of Japanese militarism, where Class A war criminals are honored. They were sentenced to death by the Tribunal for the Far East, and on the 21st of April, Prime Minister Kishida sent a traditional sacrificial offering to the aforementioned shrine. And those were many people who have suffered from that barbaric expansionist campaign and invasive policy. These actions by the Japanese administration are based on revisionism and unwillingness to admit responsibility for the tragedy of the people. The Japanese side has tried to convince that the Yasukuni Shrine visits have nothing to do with militarism. And it was mentioned by the retired general of the so-called self-defense forces. And it's just denial to confirm the outcome of the Second World War. With regard to Bulgaria, the demolition of a monument to Soviet soldiers in the Bulgarian capital that was barbarically destroyed last December. We noted with pain and indignation this desecration of memorials and graves of heroes who liberated Europe from Nazism. The authorities just are conscious accomplices of those who destroy those monuments. Bulgaria blatantly ignores its obligations to ensure the preservation of monuments and a bilateral treaty with Russia on friendly relations of the 4th of August 1992 and agreement of cooperation in the field of culture and education of the 19th of April 1993. There are marches glorifying Hitler's accomplices and supporting massive supplies of arms to a neo-Banderite regime in Kiev. Step by step, the moral decomposition of the Bulgarian ruling elite takes place that has sworn allegiance to the Euro-Atlantic Club. And here monuments have no chance of surviving. This policy is not supported by the Bulgarian people. They are devoted to their ideals of freedom and cherish the memory of their history. There are patriotic forces growing in the country who are ready to support the traditional and patriotic values. And we hope that eventually the sensible majority will prevail who honor the feat of these soldiers liberators. So now, with regard to pro-Western values, attempts are underway to put obstacles to Russian language in the world. The Latvian authorities have decided to deny teaching Russian as the second language in schools because around the half choose Russian as the second foreign language, and they do not want to lose this possibility because more than 40% of the population use Russian as the language of international communication. It's not just decreasing the importance of the Russian language, it's a manifestation of chauvinism, progressive discriminatory treatment of our compatriots on ethnic grounds, on language grounds, is just a direct violation of basic human rights and the right for mother tongue, for culture, for historic memory and traditions. It has all been enshrined in many declarations that Latvia allegedly conforms with, and they have just not provided no comments on those shameful practices, cruel Russophobic actions, harassment of children in schools, falsification of historical facts. They just do not only limit the access to Russian language, but access to Russian literature and history that is a part of a global cultural heritage, part of a global civilization. So they will suffer themselves from such a policy, because they literally by force do everything, do their best for their society to regress. So we have a colossal responsibility for promoting the Russian language abroad, and we will respond to all the attacks against the Russian language and protect the rights of and interests of our compatriots. Increase access to digital formats, to digital resources, and encourage those who have interest to Russian language and culture. Yesterday in Belgrade, the tragedy was remembered, a NATO strike against the Soviet radio company television. On the night of 22nd, 23rd of April 1999, NATO aircraft launched a strike that killed 16 civilians, technicians, editors, makeup artists, and a cameraman. It was not just unpunished. The West justified those crimes, citing that the Serbian media had been declared legitimate military targets before the military operation. Now there is a monument in Belgrade, and there is just one word on it. Why? Zašto in Serbian. So for those who dare to defend their freedom and dignity or just speak the truth, they are made to keep silence by any means. That's the purpose of the collective West. It was implemented in Serbia, now it is implemented in Ukraine and around the Ukrainian crisis. We have just mentioned today the purposeful murder of the Russian war correspondent, a Russian journalist, who was killed when performing his professional duties, and the money to the Ukrainian forces is given to the representatives of the collective West. Now what the West has committed with Serbia, it's little for the West. He now requests to forget the events of the bombings of 1999. They need just another experiment. Back then Japan was bombed, and now Japan was forced to forget that. Now they try to make Serbia forget who bombed it in 1999. Forget about the callous murder of 2,500 of its citizens, among them 89 children. Destroyed infrastructure, 118 infrastructure and telecommunications facilities. Forget the multi-billion losses. Trying to force Serbia, as they say, turn the page of history, but actually want Serbia to tear this page away from its own history, from the history of its country and its culture. But earlier, the United States, as in Japan, generously paid for that in money, and the money was kept in those countries, so they invested in history. I do not know how it can be named from moral point of view, but they had some profits. Now what they promised to Serbia, it's just words, just in words. And the hypocrisy of the West does not know bounds, as it ignores the strikes against Belgrade on the 23rd of April 1999. It was supposed to be a symbol. In the OSCE, they were supposed to set a special date to teach, to educate, in order not to repeat those events. But there is no such date, no such fact. And back then, Washington demonstrated the commitment to its so-called ideals of democracy, turning it under the pretext of fight against propaganda. They were ready to violate any commitments, any norms and rules, if their selfish, narrow interests are at stake. On the 17th, 19th of April in Kampala, the first conference on combating infectious diseases was organized together with Rospotreb Zor and the Minister of Health of the Republic of Uganda. More than 150 participants from 17 states and international organizations took part. Russia was represented by leading epidemiologists, virologists, and experts in laboratory diagnostics, specialists in biological safety. The issues of prevention and response to outbreaks of infectious diseases were considered, as well as new challenges and threats to regional and global security. It was an exchange and examples were made from the work of Russian epidemiologists in the Republic of Congo, Guinea, and Madagascar. And there was a gift to the government of Uganda during the second Russia-Africa summit. A mobile laboratory was donated, and there were proposals to hold it regularly once in 2 years. One more humanitarian issue. I would like to express my gratitude to the Kyrgyzstan Republic, the Kyrgyz Republic that sent humanitarian assistance, 20 trucks with humanitarian aid, more than 350 tons, including food, tents, and other items. It's necessary now, and we consider this support by our friends as a symbol of the high level of Russian-Kyrgyz allied relations. And there were many questions with regard to the Turkish authorities' decisions not to allow Russian tourists who are going to Latin America, and with the materials of our experts, I would like to collectively reply to that. According to the information received by the Consulate General of Russia in Istanbul, the recent refusals to board Turkish Airlines flights via Istanbul to Latin American countries, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and a number of other countries, is connected primarily to the rules introduced by those countries, the rules of entries. And here the air carrier is guided by ICAO rules, and the requirements include the passenger booking number for round trip, hotel booking confirmation, no difference between the dates of flights and the hotel booking dates, transit flight within Latin America within 24 hours, baggage other than carry-on luggage, and passengers indicating their purpose of trip, study, work, the translation, and notarized documents in translation in English, and availability of credit cards and cash, availability of the so-called ocean to board, a confirmation of the country of destination received by the airline, and the Russian-Turkish subgroup of safety and protection of tourists' rights. Its meeting was held on the 19th of April 2024, and the Russian Embassy and Consulate General in Istanbul follow the information posted on the official resources, and the situation is studied attentively. Another event on the 23rd of April in Gimo, there was a Youth Russia-Africa Forum. This event has already become traditional. It's its third time. Yesterday, a video message by Minister Sergei Lavrov was published, and this event is held as part of the plan of Russia-Africa Partnership in 2023-2026, approved by participants of the second Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg on the 27th-28th of July 2023.
The forum is a permanent discussion platform on the premises of the MGIMO University, where representatives of student communities from Russia and Africa discussed relevant issues on the bilateral and global agenda. The event will offer an opportunity to future experts in international relations to exchange their views, present reports, and receive professional assessment of invited experts. The participants have a very tight schedule, including panel sessions, roundtables, academic debates, cultural and sports events in the blended format. Political figures, representatives of academic circles, diplomats, entrepreneurs, and students from Russia and Africa will participate. Another interesting and historical date that I would like to mention: the 24th of April is the day that marks the day of Armenian genocide in the Ottoman Empire. This sad day has a significant historic, spiritual, and moral and political value for the allied country of Armenia and the friendly peoples of the Republic. We were one of the first countries to officially recognize the genocide. Many Russian cities held commemorative events yesterday, and I would like to say a couple of words about the all-Russian action campaign, the Ribbon of St. George. It was launched yesterday, and traditionally it will last till the 9th of May. Millions of ribbons as a symbol of the victory will be distributed among our citizens, including citizens living abroad. This campaign was born from the initiative of RIA Novosti journalists in March 2005, and it has become a tradition uniting millions of people abroad. It is held annually by volunteers in over 90 countries of the world, with participation of ministries, agencies, state corporations, and annually about 20 million ribbons are distributed. This year, the ribbons will be distributed in 7,000 places, including beyond the polar cycle. I think our citizens don't need my explanations, but I will explain to the world community. The Ribbon of St. George is a symbol of victory and victory over fascism for millions of people, not only in Russia but abroad. It is a symbol of memory, respect, and pride, and the connection between our generations and military glory. Another important historical date that is being celebrated throughout the year. As you would know, this year we celebrate the 50th anniversary since the beginning of construction of one of the longest railroads in the world. I'm talking about the idea that dates back to the 18th century, but only in the 1920s, the engineering survey works began to construct route that would run parallelly to the Trans-Siberian Railway. The construction works were interrupted on many occasions. On the 27th of April 1974, the 17th Congress of the Young Communists declared the Baikal-Amur main line a shock construction project. And on the 8th of July 1974, the Central Committee of the Communist Party adopted a decree on the construction of the Baikal-Amur mainland. It crosses 11 full-flowing rivers, 7 mountain ridges, over 1,000 kilometers run through the permafrost and high seismic areas. The project included 8 tunnels, 142 bridges, over 200 railway stations, and over 60 towns and settlements. On the 1st of October 1984, the golden spike was hammered into place that connected the western and the eastern parts of the railway station, and the dam became a single mainland. It was constructed with participation of workers from Bulgaria, Hungary, Mongolia, and other countries of the socialist bloc. The railway continues to be improved nowadays too. As you would remember, on the 5th of December 2003, the 15-kilometer long Severomursk tunnel has become operational. And in March 2023, President Putin signed a decree on celebrating the 2024, the 50th anniversary since the beginning of construction of the mainland. Russia has launched a digital interactive portal that is dedicated to construction of the main line. There is a BAM diary. It is an interactive digital documentary project that tells stories about the people involved in the construction of BAM. On the 17th of April, a postage stamp was issued dedicated to BAM, and the Museum of Modern History of Russia will offer to its visitors the exhibition Between the Past and the Future. This project tells the story of construction of one of the largest railroads in the world that is so significant for Russia. There is an entire body of culture that has formed around the mainland. Visitors will learn more about the lives and daily routines of those who were involved in the construction. And another piece of information for you, I'm talking about the competition for young experts in international relations named after Gromyko. This competition is for CIS students, postgraduates, teachers, and diplomats and young experts. It has been held annually since 2018 and has already brought together over 2,100 young researchers from 11 countries. The goal is to promote studies of international relations and modern history of diplomacy and integration processes in the Eurasian community. It is aimed at promoting ties between educational institutions in the CIS, the Eurasian Economic Union. It is organized by Gromyko Association of Foreign Policy Studies, MGIMO University Academy of Public Administration under the President of the Republic of Belarus, and the Institute for Europe. Such cooperation plays an exclusive role in the context of the changing world order. Since it was launched, the competition has become a leading platform for dialogue between talented young researchers in the field of international relations. And this event, the competition has expanded horizons for cooperation in the Eurasian space. And another important announcement on this matter, if you want to participate, you should send your application no later than the 13th of May 2024. In the transcript of today's briefing, you will see a link where you can submit your application. And now I'm ready to move on to your question. Международная жизнь. Are you with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Recently, we've seen reports that Armenian media promote the idea that President Putin allegedly, as early as 2020, recognized that Nagorno-Karabakh belongs to Azerbaijan. Well, you know, these ideas, we hear them in the information space of Armenia and in the international information space from time to time. It is nothing but a distortion of words and activities, acts of the Russian leadership. Let me once again explain you how the events unfolded. As a result of personal participation of President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, on the 9th of November 2020, trilateral statement was adopted at the top level about the ceasefire and the stop of all hostilities in the zone of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. The leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia adopted a gentleman agreement to postpone the resolution of issue about the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. We will attach the links to the transcript of today's briefing. Let me quote President Putin, his words that he said at the press conference on the 17th of November 2020. I quote, "No one, even Armenia, has recognized the independence of Karabakh. From the point of view of international law, Azerbaijan returned territories that it and the entire international community considered the territory of Azerbaijan. The final status of Karabakh hasn't been defined. We agreed to maintain the status quo that exists for today." End of quote. After you've heard these quotations, these quotes are published on the website of the President of the Russian Federation. You can find them on the websites of information agencies, news agencies of all countries. After that, how can someone make statements that you've just mentioned? Everything is crystal clear with the Russian position. It's obvious that fake news serve the goal of confusing the Armenian and international community. Fact is that in October 2022, a summit of the under the aegis of the EU took place in Prague, and it was Armenian leadership that recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as the territory of Azerbaijan. In press, there have been leaks that the agreement was endorsed by the US side in late September 2022 in Washington. Apparently, it also requires some official statements on the part of official Yerevan. And those are the statements people should pay attention, rather than some fake news that attempts to invent something that has never existed. We will promote our position. And another question, since we've already mentioned the topic of Moldova, on the 17th of April, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of this country spoke about some inconveniences that the Embassy of Moldova to Moscow experiences, and he said that probably Russia will only allow to open one electoral station when presidential elections are held in Moldova in October. How would you comment on it? Well, I don't know what exactly Minister Popshoy means by certain inconveniences. Probably he means that the number of staff members of the diplomatic mission has been reduced after one of Moldovan diplomats was declared persona non grata several days ago. Why did it happen? It was a response to the expulsion of an employee of the Russian embassy in Moldova on the 19th of March. So these difficulties for the Moldovan embassy were created by the Moldovan authority itself. But probably they deliberately initiated this exchange of persona non gratas in order to create difficulties for themselves, but then it would be nothing but provocation. As for the election stations, in the course of the October elections of the president, we are not going to create any hindrances for the Moldovan side. We don't believe that we should provide an equal response to the undemocratic and unfriendly decision of Chisinau to allow the voting at the elections of President of Russia only in the premises of our embassy. We are truly committed to the principles of democracy, and we are ready to assist the Moldovan side in ensuring the electoral rights of the citizens of Moldova living in our country. In order to prevent any provocations, any fake news or any distortions, we confirm our willingness to provide any assistance to the Moldovan side as they are preparing the elections on their elections in the territory of our country. But here there is an interesting question. Is official Chisinau interested in it? Time will show. Thank you very much. Unless you have any further questions, now I ask if Izvestia are with us. Yes, we are here. Yekaterina Pozharskaya. On the 21st of April, during its congress in Moscow, representatives of Moldovan opposition declared that they established the Pobeda, or Victory Bloc. Upon their return to Moldova in the airport of Chisinau, they faced long checks. How would you comment on it? Unfortunately, it is a reflection of Moldovan values. According to them, their activities are aimed at implementation of Western values in Moldova, but truth is that European values are nothing but restrictions of freedom of speech, and it has become a visiting card of the current Moldovan leadership. Official Chisinau likes talking about its desire to join the EU and its commitment to democratic values, but in reality we see that they have fascist rules, unfavorable media are being shut down, journalists are being expelled, and criminal cases are initiated against political opponents. Therefore, representatives of Moldovan opposition have to convene in Russia. Here in Russia, we have no hindrances. No one is going to prevent their activities. It has been predictable that Moldovan authorities would act in this manner when the opposition leaders return from Russia. According to media reports, citizens who returned from Russia had to stay in the airport for many hours without drinking water, without access to basic facilities. At the same time, citizens who came to the country from the citizens of Moldova who returned from the US passed the border control without any problems. According to Moldovan media, there are calls to organize repressions against citizens who had visited Russia. Those are modern-day realities that, unfortunately, as I've already mentioned, have become a symbol of the Sandu regime. Under the guise of implementation of the so-called European project, they build a repression machine. The goal is to eliminate democracy and any manifestations of dissent. Unless you have further questions, we move on. Is the Media Corporation of China with us? Yes, thank you. I have two questions. World ocean should not be an arena for competition. That's what one of the leaders of China said at the inauguration of the 19th symposium in the city of Qingdao. At this symposium, many questions have been discussed, including global security, peace and security in the ocean, and rules-based order. Now the symposium is already attended by 29 countries, including Russia. What would be your comment? Well, you know, military agencies deal with military cooperation, so you'd better address your question to them. Thank you. Then my second question. In early April, during the visit to China, the Treasury Secretary of the U.S. Spoke about solar panels, e-mobiles, and semiconductors. According to her, there is a big demand in Beijing for these items. And Ambassador to the U.S., when he spoke at the Harvard University, said to the contrary that production capacities are not excessive, but are in deficit on the contrary. How would you comment the words of the Secretary of Treasury? Do China production capacities, are they excessive or in deficit on the contrary?
I think what's how is it related, the Chinese Ministry of Finance and the production facilities in China? They are participants in trade agreements and international organizations with the respective standards. If the United States have some questions with regard to obligations of some country in some formats, it's within those structures that these questions need to be posed, because the situation is even more has even more paradoxes there, because in WTO, just the US are not only present there, but do not react to violations by other countries, violations of WTO standards. And it's China itself, its government, its people, its experts that should estimate. I think that the record figures of the Chinese economy demonstrate their possibility to carry out effective policy. Also, the output of the volumes of production of different types of products. It looks like an attempt to transfer their own problems, to pass them on to someone else. It's irrational governance in the United States itself. The use of non-market, illegitimate, illegal means of market competition, including protectionism, unilateral protection measures, sanctions, and trade war instruments. Thank you very much. You know, Washington is accustomed to speaking with anyone from the position of force, from the position of dominance, of some beautiful garden over the remaining jungle. This conversation is humiliating for the American people themselves. This tone, this rhetoric is humiliating for the US citizens. And it's a confirmation of their lack of force. And everyone is aware of problems in American economy. It would be better for those representatives, the Ministry of Finance of the United States, how they fight their own debts, how they just intend to raise, literally from ruins, the whole states in their own country, how they plan to modernize their own productions, economy, finance system, how they plan to abandon the speculatory economy in favor of real production. That should be what they should be telling about, and not teaching other countries how to overcome the problems of their development and what to do within their countries at the domestic level. It's about us as a state, as an economy, being constantly dictated their will by the United States. And we observe that China and Russia, that double deterrence policy of the US, and we will provide a double answer to that, as mentioned by representatives of Russia and China repeatedly already. Thank you. Thank you. Is Baku TV with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have 2 questions today. The first one is about an interview to the British media. The Armenian Prime Minister doubted the CSTO functioning, as the organization does not respond to the violation of the borders of Armenia in 2021-2022, because there was no delimitation of the border, and further he says that it will not respond to the violation of Russian-Japanese border, where there are also no delimitations. You know, we regret that the Armenian authorities publicly criticize the CSTO, and it's not just criticism, it should be criticized, but it's groundless. And the heads of the Secretariat and publicly confirmed the preservation of all the obligations in full compliance with the goals and principles of the CSTO. The organization has proved to be in a high demand in the South Caucasus. And an advantage for Yerevan is the CSTO taking into account the factor of national sovereignty, in contrast with some Western structure and military blocs. And no one doubts that the responsibility of the CSTO is the territory of Armenia, and within the framework of the delimitation negotiations, the border should be precised, the border line on the ground, and it should be recognized that the issues in connection with territories in dispute or enclaves should be resolved. As the Armenian government itself took a decision to transfer some towns and settlements to Azerbaijan, and this is the CSTO also to blame for that. Thank you. To continue, recently the Secretary General of the CSTO was interviewed by a Russian media, and it's a citation, balance of forces in the South Caucasus in case of Armenia leaving the CSTO could change. How do you agree with that, and what could be the changes in your opinion? So if you have some questions to the CSTO as a structure, you would better address them, maybe some questions based on some media materials. And with regard to security, we have repeatedly said that there is an intention implementation by the collective West countries, their actions in this region and their penetration, not for peacekeeping purposes, but for collecting data. It's understandable what data against states to trace the situation there, not from the point of view of some peacekeeping monitoring, but for some economic and other profit, not only for them, but for the destabilization of the situation in all the areas in the region. Those tendencies are clearly violated. They clearly violate the balance of forces in the region, and primarily are harmful to the peace settlement and peacekeeping in the region that should be in place in the region and that could have opened. We still hope that it could open possibilities for economy, for the development of the economic potential, for the prosperity of all the peoples in the region. It could become a significant obstacle on the way of this peaceful development. As we know, based on many similar actions in many other points, territories, regions, people were forced to act against each other. Conflicts were provoked. And there are no other examples under the slogans of some peacekeeping. Westerners would come and life would get better there. There are no such examples for the latest decades, and we understand very well what is happening here. Thank you very much. That's all for us for today. Is Reuters with us? Yes, Madam Zakharova, we're here. We have a question on a trip by Antony Blinken to China this week. Now Blinken is here with a visit. Is Russia considering a visit by Blinken as an attempt to make harm to the cooperation between China and Russia against the background of US sanctions against Chinese banks who are helping Russia with the export of double-purpose products, and we have the Wall Street Journal publishing about those sanctions against Chinese banks and exports of dual-use goods. How could you comment on that? We have never commented on the relations of two sovereign states with each other without direct link with our country, but here there is this link, taken into account the policy of the United States that have officially declared their course, their policy on double deterrence of Russia and China. And here I have the right to answer in detail. We observe China's desire to build constructive and equal relations with the United States of America. But Russia has also, until some moment, has tried to preserve positive features and demonstrated some unprecedented patience in a desire to preserve all those achievements made in the Russian-US relations. But it's about Washington archaic ideas about its omnipotence, and it's all on the basis of Washington's ideas that everything is permitted to it. And it's about the desire of the United States to make others pay for their own mistakes, for their own miscalculations and problems. I have already answered the question of your Chinese colleague. As for the United States' attempts to drive a wedge into the strategic partnership between Russia and China, it's doomed to failure. It's not about just the relations of Russia and China. It's about the relations with other capitals. It's the tactics of a certain part of political establishment of the US based on known divide et impera concept, historical concept, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry has provided comments on cooperation between Russia and China, of double standards, interpretation of international events, and the actions by Washington can only be called irresponsible. Our interaction with China is based on the principle of equal, respectful partnership and mutual support on key issues for both sides. Our leaders have repeatedly proclaimed the bilateral cooperation of Russia and China being better in quality than the monocentric blocs of the Cold War era, when someone exclusively dictates his will to the others. Our cooperation is not directed against third countries, and it's the value of the Russian-Chinese strategic nexus, not subject to the influence of external conjunction situation. Is News9 with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Mikhail Rosen, News9. We have 3 questions. Moscow has acted as a peacekeeper in the relations between Yerevan and Baku. Within the recent years, the Russian Foreign Ministry has called for quicker demarcation of the Armenian-Azerbaijan border. And what's your relation to the first boundary pillar being installed on the Azerbaijan-Armenian border? So we support the political and diplomatic settlement of all the issues of border demarcation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We believe that they should be of a mutually accepted nature and should become a basis for stability in the region. And we adhere to the trilateral agreements of the leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. One more question, of course. Alan Simonyan, the chair of the Armenian parliament, used the term invasion for Russia at the EU Parliament Speakers Conference. He also added that he supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine as well as Moldova and Georgia. How do you estimate the Yerevan rhetoric against the background of the Ukrainian conflict? Actually, yesterday, Valentina Matvienko, the Federation Council chair, has already commented on this issue. In our legislative authorities, we support those statements, and the Armenian parliament members were requested to provide an estimation of assessment of the anti-Russian rhetoric of the named representative. And the third question. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has declared the defense industry of his country being transferred to military regime. He said that during his visit to Poland, during a meeting with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. What does the Sunak decision mean for the defense industry of Russia?
And after that, we hear his statements about aggression and aggressive rhetorics and politics. It's not them who should speak about it. We consider the statement by the UK Prime Minister that you've mentioned as an element of the internal British campaign ahead of the elections to the local House of Commons. Their promises of assistance to Kyiv is part of political campaign. Let's touch upon the events unfolding in the UK. I'm talking about political aspects. They comment on our internal situation regularly, so we have the right of response. UK is in a deep economic crisis as a result of the ruling of Conservatives, so the government takes any opportunity to increase its attractiveness in the eyes of the disappointed voters in order to instill at least some hope for a bright economic future in them. I can understand why British voters are disappointed. They don't have much causes for optimism. Let's look at some figures. 2023, the GDP amounted to just 0.1% of the technical recession in July-December. According to the estimates, for the coming 5 years, the debt burden will remain at the record level of 37–38% of the GDP. The sovereign debt of the UK is around 100% of the GDP. Let's speak more clearly. They spend exactly as much as they earn, or they earn exactly as much as they spend, without making any profits, as you understand it. The budget deficit in 2023-2024 in the British financial year is expected to reach the level of £112 billion, or 4.2% of the GDP. What do you think? With these indicators, do Tories have a hope to remain the ruling party? According to the polls, the ruling party is expected to experience the most dramatic defeat that will be the end of political career of the current Prime Minister and many hawks from Sunak's close team. Under these conditions, other people will shape the new policy in order to restore the national economy, and we hope the next government will prioritize the interests of its own people. They should be honest to their citizens and not invent any stories about the alleged assistance to Ukraine. If the UK truly supported the citizens of Ukraine, and if they truly thought that Ukrainians have any rights, they wouldn't supply the depleted uranium shells to Ukraine, because such shells are killing the current, the present, and the future generations of Ukraine. In the media, they speak about their support for Ukraine, but as a matter of fact, in reality, they don't care in the least about the country. They've never considered the countries whom they don't consider an equal state, and they've never treated Ukraine as an equal state. Otherwise, they would have cared about the human rights in that country. They never considered it necessary to speak about such country with such countries in equal terms and take care of their future. Thank you, Madam Zakharova. RIA Novosti, are you with us? Yes, good afternoon. We have a question about Senegal. In early April, the new leadership came to power. We'd like to know what Moscow is expecting from it. Russia has traditionally friendly relations with the Republic of Senegal. In 2023, this West African country has become one of our main trade partners on the African continent. They rank number 2 among sub-Saharan states. We've been consistently enhancing our political dialogue, and we have mutually beneficial ties in various fields. We respect the sovereign choice of the Senegal people. In March, in the first round, the Senegali people elected Bassirou Diomaye Faye as the new head of state, it's obvious that Senegal people have hopes for better future political changes, social and economic changes. We take note of the statement by the Senegal leader that he is going to make significant reforms that would affect the relations of the country with foreign partners, including the EU. As we see, Africans are getting their future into their hands. They are abandoning the post-colonial past, and they speak about their future as the future of sovereign states, and such aspirations can only face support in Russia. President Putin was one of the first leaders to send a letter to the newly elected head of the republic, and we hope that under the new leadership of the country, the mutually respectful and beneficial cooperation will acquire a new quality. Thank you. Is Nadalu with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova, Anadolu. Yelena Kislova. My first question, how would you assess the statement by Polish President Andrzej Duda? Well, first I think he's Duda. In his interview to the Fact news agency, he said that Polish authorities are ready for deployment of nuclear weapons in its territory. Well, you know, we published a respective comment on the website of the ministry just a couple of days ago. I'll be brief, and I'll tell you that such provocative statements by Polish leadership is nothing new. They want to get closer to the nuclear arsenals of the US deployed in Europe. The Polish authorities make no secret of their aspirations, and they try to link it to their policy that is hostile to Russia. It looks like Warsaw is trying to get even more attention on the part of the planners in the Russian General Staff. It's not difficult to imagine that once nuclear weapons are deployed in Poland, they will immediately be added on the list of legitimate goals for the attacks in case of a direct confrontation, military confrontation between Russia and NATO. Thank you. My second question. The authorities of Switzerland declared that they have frozen 13 billion francs of Russian assets, and about half of this amount are assets of the central bank. How can you comment on it? The so-called freezing of Russian assets, primarily the assets of the Bank of Russia in Western jurisdictions, and the attempts to confiscate them gravely violate the fundamental principles and norms of international law, including the principle of sovereign equality of states in the UN Charter. Any claims, however we defined, on the property of our country are considered as a theft. In accordance with the principle of reciprocity in international relations, we will take symmetric measures. And when I'm talking about symmetric measures, I mean our responsive measures. We are working on them in cooperation with the respective agencies. Well, it actually doesn't mean symmetric. But the arsenal of political and economic countermeasures is something that Russia has at its disposal, and they will affect Bern unless local authorities change their mind and dare to use their theft skills. Is Liberalk with us? I reiterate, I repeat, is Verelk news agency with us? Yes, good afternoon. I have two questions. My first question about the withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers from Nagorno-Karabakh. Do you think that after the ethnic cleansing that was conducted by Azerbaijan, the trilateral statement of the 9th of November ceased to exist? Well, you know, the trilateral agreements by the leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia remain valid. Officially, none of the countries has disavowed those commitments. And my second question, recently there have been reports that Azerbaijan destroyed a 19th century church in the settlement of Shushi. How can you comment on these acts of vandalism and destruction of the objects of Armenian cultural and historical heritage? Well, Armenia and Azerbaijan regularly accuse one another of destruction of cultural and historical objects, so we call on Baku and Yerevan to discuss these topics in their bilateral contacts, and we are ready to provide any assistance for such talks. Good afternoon. Saga Radio. As for the Russian estimates concerning the newly adopted piece of legislation in the US regarding military assistance, do you think it will affect the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine? Could you repeat, please? Well, the assistance provided by Washington to Ukraine, according to your estimates, the estimates of military defense in Russia, can it change the situation on the battlefield? Well, as for the changes in the battlefield, as you know, it's military of defense who can give such comments. As for political assessments, they have already been given by the Security Council of Russia. This assistance is not going to change our commitment to reach the goals and objectives of the special military operation. It's what the military leadership of Russia keeps reiterating, so there cannot be a slightest doubt that our declared goals will be achieved. So please don't have any doubt that any U.S. actions will not reach their goals. Their strategic defeat that they want to inflict on Russia unsuccessfully. So we are doomed to fail in the future too. Thank you. And the second part of my question, if I may. Have you seen any signals from Western capitals about a ceasefire or negotiations, including from Paris? Emmanuel Macron has expressed a hope for the so-called Olympic ceasefire. What do you think of it? What signals do you mean? I'm talking about ceasefire and negotiations. Yes, I see. All terms and expressions containing the word peace are used by the West, primarily by Washington, Brussels, and the Kiev regime, exclusively as a guise in order to conceal their true goals. And the true goal of the West is something that they can formulate very clearly: a strategic defeat they want to inflict on Russia, and new supplies of weapons to Ukraine, and further assistance in the form of financial assets. So any statements concerning some Zelensky peace formula, some peace conferences where this formula should be discussed, they only serve one single goal: to show to the Ukrainian population that the West wishes Ukraine in the region all the best. But we understand that in reality, those who want peace, they call and provide assistance in order to facilitate ceasefire. They call to stop the supplies of weapons, and they call to the cessation of any discussions aimed at inflicting strategic or tactical defeats on anyone. In reality, there is nothing that could mean that the collective West really considers peace in the region as its ultimate goal. We see that their goals are exactly the opposite. More weapon supplies to the Kiev regime, more deaths on the battlefield, greater terrorist activities of the Zelensky regime, and the ultimate goal has been formulated not by us but by the West itself in a very frank manner. The representatives of the West and its institutions have already formulated it by themselves. It is a strategic defeat on Russia. This is now going to happen. Thank you. Is Sputnik with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I have one question. Leader of the Moldova police, Viorel Chernetsan, said on Tuesday that citizens will face fines if they wear the ribbon of St. George that is banned in the country. Can we consider it as a sign of Russophobia, and what can we advise to the citizens of Moldavia who would like to commemorate their fathers and grandfathers on that day? Well, let me remind you that this decision was taken by the Moldovan leadership in 2022. It was exactly 2 years ago, and it's one of the most odious and shameful manifestations of the policy of the Sandu regime that she's been following at the behest of the West. It is a sign of the lack of respect to their own citizens and the past generations. The Sandu regime call it a European project. Well, I don't know, probably that's the essence of the European project, to eliminate the idea of the people, of their dignity, their history, and of their sovereignty, national identity, and their freedom. Probably that is the true European project. But in essence, it is the imposition of Russophobia and historical revisionism, and attempts to dismantle the Moldovan national identity and statehood. They make no secret of it, but they try to sell a European project to the people of Moldova as a sign of economic well-being, respect for human rights, and so on. But on the other hand, what they do is what I've just mentioned, starting from historical revisionism up to the demolition of their statehood and preparation of Moldova for losing its own sovereignty to Romania. As for what we can advise to the citizens of Moldova, I'm sure that the citizens of Moldova don't need our advice. They know what to do. They honor the historic deeds of their fathers and grandfathers, who, together with other peoples of the USSR, have defeated fascism and have brought victory to the country and the whole mankind. We have no doubt that even in the context of direct confrontation and the citizens will find a way to celebrate this important date. Although memorials are being demolished and festive events are being prohibited, the victory is in their hearts, and no one will be able to ever cancel their love and their commitment to their history.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is CBC with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. There have been some questions about the demarcation of the Armenian-Azerbaijan border, and we will have a question on this issue. There has hope has appeared that stability and security atmosphere will be installed in the region, will appear, but what's the relation of the Russian Foreign Ministry to this mission staying on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan? I have already commented on this issue, and with regard to the European Union so-called civilian mission, we have never doubted its real purpose, its intelligence spying activities. And is Большая Asia, bigger Asia with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have observed another outburst in the activities of the Westerners in the Central Asian region. Also with regard to Kyrgyzstan, you have mentioned today. And now the chair of the Kyrgyz Cabinet of Ministers, Akalbek Japarov, in the beginning of April, said about the Russian Mir cards being used in the Kyrgyz Republic. And international human rights organization Freedom House is publishing that Kyrgyzstan is one of the non-democratic republics of Central Asian region. Does it mean that the West is interfering again with its democratic opinions? So the purpose is just understandable to all of us, to cause chaos, to force the sides against each other, and then here also divide and rule is applicable, as we have never put conditions to our humanitarian aid in political requirements. And we mentioned it during negotiations and as well as publicly. And we receive a lot of response for that. And we see the similar aggressive reaction in the West that happened to Kyrgyzstan after the renewed law on non-commercial organizations. This law limits the possibilities of destructive influence of external forces to the situation within the country. And by the way, the Western countries have such a law in force, but as we know, it's a principle of segregation. It's exclusive right of someone that is not allowed to anyone else. It's hegemony that's just painful hegemony that is inherent, still inherent to the collective West. And the West just forgets that they have similar laws. I do not understand that. It's not part of some common knowledge. Why do they not publish that, as the situation requires that, in my opinion? As the USA positions itself as a pillar of democracy, but they have similar law that envisages responsibility in case of such violations. And we have adopted such, we have taken that into account, the comments by the officials of the country, and continue our cooperation. Thank you. Is Golos Otечества, Voice of the Fatherland, with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello. Now the Victory Day holiday is approaching. Why should that be celebrated? And the term fatherland is understood by everyone differently. What's the meaning? Could you provide a definition of this term, fatherland? Which definition? I will not provide any definitions because there are encyclopedic dictionaries for that. There are historical documents. And there are many documents, concepts, strategies determining the development of our country. And there is intelligence, soul education with every specific person. And with that, you could learn about general definitions and then make your own formula on the basis of that. Regarding Victory Day, why should that be celebrated? Because it's the day that means victory over non-human actions. It's a day that means a possibility to sacrifice the most valuable to you, not only for your personal interests, but for the true values. It's the day that means victory of love over hate, of the generosity of the heart and soul over egoism, the good over the evil. It's the day that is in the hearts all the 365 days in the year. It's with us, but it gathers those days together, reminding us that we wouldn't have existed if the previous generations, for someone great-grandfathers or great-grandfathers, so the previous generations have sacrificed their health, their lives, their future and their prosperity, comfort, because no one spoke about that back then. I'm saying that for the current generations, for our country to have the future, for our people to have the future as a civilization, for Russia to have new generations in general. I don't know, I can speak about that for hours based on the example of my own family, families of our compatriots, on the basis of documents, historical chronicles, and such issues sometimes are perceived as offensive because they seem to be obvious. But on the other hand, I understand that these questions are relevant because there have been so many offenses against historical memories, documentary films, documentary literature, monuments, archive materials. There have been some fake news, fake facts about the aimed at decoding our people, and within the last 20 years, the authorities of our country, our public figures, our legislators, scientists, cultural figures have done so much, and science is just, I would like to mention in particular, it's also about studying history, and so much has been done in order to bring us back to this humanity. It's just very good against any attempts to change our code once again, because some enemies and adversaries of our country, they do want to do that. And how would you define the term fatherland for yourself? I have already answered your question, but I will think about it some more time. And from our point of view of the descendants of the winners who have fought for our country, and the borders of our country are not exactly in accordance with the borders for which our grandfathers fought. Now the NATO troops are there, and even more military equipment and the troops are arriving there. Is the civil war underway? Is it a question to me? It's a question to everyone for discussion. You know, if it's a rhetoric question, then you have performed your function. If you have a specific question, let us make it more specific to make some elaborations on those topics, and you regularly ask similar questions, raise such issues. I think it's, so to say, illogical. Put those questions to those who have formed back then the approaches, if it's relevant for you. What should be done now for the protection of the fatherland, for the protection of historical memories? I think it is done, and done sincerely, to a full extent. I think maybe, yes, it could be done better. We will do our best. Can the Russian citizens influence the amendments to doctrinal documents of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if the Russian people just require to change the foreign policy of a state? Is there such a procedure? We have a democratic society, and I would remind you that in accordance with the constitution of the Russian Federation, the people is the primary source of power, and it has direct power and a power through public authorities. A referendum and free elections can serve as a manifestation of that power. And you have correctly mentioned the concept of the Russian foreign policy that is adopted by the President of the Russian Federation, who is, as you know, the head of the state. And according to the constitution, he determines the main areas of the country's foreign policy, represents the state in foreign relations, and the president of our country gets his authority as a result of free elections. And by having recently elected the current president, the people of the Russian Federation have expressed their support to the acting president, and both the president and the foreign ministry are in contact with the citizens of the country, their representatives in various existing formats, civil initiative, deputy requests as a reflection of the will of the people, as well as dialogue against executive and legislative powers in our country, also implemented by the representatives of the foreign ministry and other bodies. And these are the details of those approaches. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Is the compatriots Journal of Mesti with us? I am sad that we have received this question recently, and we will reply directly if the person is not here with us now. If not, we will just reply personally. I would like to clarify if I have answered all the questions. Something else? Moscow Post. Hello. Yes, hello. We have one question. How would the foreign ministry estimate the Estonian foreign ministry statements on the breaking ties if the Estonian church does not tear its ties with the Russian Orthodox Church. Yes, we have mentioned the clarification, the visits to the Estonian monastery with the aim of clarifications of the positions of the Orthodox Church, and there were direct threats of closure if they keep ties to the Russian Orthodox Church. Simultaneously with those threats, there are also threats against priests in other parishes of the Estonian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. Aside from the Interior Ministry representatives, there are also officials lower ranking of a lower rank who visit similar parishes with such aims. These are, I would underline, direct threats, attempts to directly interfere into the internal affairs of a church organization, religious organization, and imposing political ideology also by intimidation and under the fear of elimination of parishes. I should not mention that it's categorically inadmissible. It's just, firstly, a violation of the domestic laws within Estonia itself and all of its foreign commitments. And Tallinn violates the rights of its citizens to freedom of religion, and the Russian Federation observes the violations of the rights of its compatriots, religious and not only religious, and Russia raises those issues on the platforms of international organizations. It's just contrary to what have been the aspirations of Estonia as a state when they spoke about their political stance. They have ended up with a dictatorship, administrative command system, and disruption of any ideas about the human rights. Have you said you have just one question? Then thank you. Goodbye to you. Thank you for your participation. See you next time, and prosperity to you. Thank you.